With a competitive tax regime, government fundings, and a culture of life-work balance, Finland might be a good place to start your entrepreneurship journey. In 2016, there were 4,000 businesses started by immigrants in Finland, most of them belonging to the private services sector. When no job offers seems to fit your skills and you feel confident enough to be your own boss, why not consider an entrepreneur journey? Are you thrilled by the words of startups? Do you feel like implementing your ideas would change the world we're living in? This episode is made for you. Welcome to What's Next Finland, a podcast series of 6 episodes that will tell you all about living, studying and working in Finland as an international. My name is Noémie. I've been living in Finland for about 4 years now, and in this series we will discuss topics such as looking for a job, looking for an internship, creating your own company, but also more day-to-day problems such as making friends or learning the Finnish language. Did you know that in 2024, Yrityskeskus released a guide about how to become an entrepreneur in Finland? You will find inside all info you need about what kind of company would suit you best, and a description of each of the steps you need to follow in order to implement your projects. Free appointments are also available in many business centers all around Finland, for instance in Bisness Helsinki, Bisness Oulu, Bisness Tampere or Bisness Turku. Don't hesitate to ask advice to the people surrounding you or to a career advisor. And in the meantime, you can listen to our guest of the day, Elli-Noora, who has started her entrepreneurship journey 6 years ago. Are you familiar with the concept of elevator pitch? In this 30-60-second speech, you showcase your company's goal while sparking your audience interest. To succeed as an entrepreneur, it's crucial to have a clear vision of what your company's goals are, who your target audience is, and what sets you apart from the competition. Our guest of the day prepared an elevator pitch about her own company to give you a glimpse about what it could look like in action.
My name is Elli-Noora. I work as an entrepreneur. My company is called Luova Viesti, which means creative communications. So I work in the field of marketing and communications, and my clients are construction companies, industrial companies, associations, and consultants specializing in, for instance, IT or financial services or other fields of expertise. And I write articles, I create content for social media, and I also do some translating, and I work in events as an event hostess and promoter. Elli-Noora Nieminen, Luova Viesti. My name is Elli-Noora. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 1.5 years, and I work in the field of marketing and communications. I graduated from the University of Tampere as a French translator of law and administration in 2020, so a couple of years ago. After working as an employee for a while, then I started my own business, and here I am today.
Thank you, Elli-Noora, to be here today. Mm-hmm. And since you have started this journey way before this 1.5 years as a full-time entrepreneur, can you tell us maybe about the moment you decided to go on that path of entrepreneurship, and what were the main steps of this journey?
Thank you. So I started my business, so to speak. I became an entrepreneur 6 years ago, and I started part-time with private French classes, like tutoring. And I did that for a while, and then pretty soon I started to work in events as a hostess and as a promoter. And this was alongside my studies. When I studied to become a translator here in Finland, and why did I give French classes? Well, I used to study in France before, so I did my bachelor's degree there. And well, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so becoming an entrepreneur was quite a natural choice for me. I didn't even think about it that much. And when I started my business, it cost me like €2.50, I guess. It was, yeah, it was a stamp for the post, you know. So that was in the beginning. And then I graduated. I worked for a while in in a company who produced events and did marketing as well as a project manager. And then one day I decided that I'll just start my own business and become a full-time entrepreneur. I had many other changes in life that inspired this choice. And yeah, then I quit my job. I didn't know what to do next, but I have worked as a volunteer in many associations throughout my teenage years to high school, and even a little bit during my studies in France, but not that much. But the moment I came back to Finland, I joined my student association and became a board member. So all of this network that I had built paid off, because even when I decided just to quit my job, I started to have many customers. So for the first few months, my business did very, very well. And of course, after that, there have been many ups and downs during this 1.5 year, soon to be 2 years of entrepreneurship.
Okay. I will ask an extra question because you are also the director or co-director now, main director of the podcast Bisness Siskot. Can you also tell us a bit about why did you create this project, and what also were the steps of this sort of entrepreneurship also in a way?
Yeah, sure. So we started a Bisness Siskot with my colleague, because we wanted to try to make a podcast. So that was the main motivation. And we also wanted to talk about entrepreneurship. And we realized that there aren't that many podcasts which would give advice for entrepreneurs who are starting their business and in the beginning of their career. So that's the basic idea that we started to build a concept on, and we planned it out for many weeks, even months, I guess. And then one day we came up with a name, and we also decided that we want this podcast to be a marketing platform for both of our businesses. So that's also why we have a sort of a marketing point of view in it, but not that much. So it's mainly advice for new entrepreneurs, and why not for those who have also been in business for a while. And we had many interesting guests during our first season. And and we received a lot of positive feedback from entrepreneurs that are just starting their business, but also from our colleagues and from people that have been entrepreneurs for many years, even for a longer period than us. So
okay.
Yeah.
I will go a bit deeper with this still. Can you explain what's the title of your podcast and what it means for people who don't speak Finnish? And the second one is, could you give us a couple of examples of which guests did you invite, and how did they help you maybe get a better overview upon entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, sure. So Bisness Siskot, it's like business sisters. So the name we came up with the name because we are colleagues. So that's the sisters comes from that, and also because we are both big sisters. So yeah. And we wanted to be this sort of internet big sister, and share advice. So that was a perfect name. And our guests, the podcast was made in collaboration with Haaga-Helia, a University for Applied Sciences, and some of the guests were teachers in Haaga-Helia, and they have this startup school. So that's also there was a good platform for collaborator. There were common interests, and it was good to collaborate with them. And then some of our guests were entrepreneurs. So we had an accountant who gave advice on accounting, on taxes, and we also had the possibility for our listeners to ask him questions in advance, though. But yeah, and then we also had Jenni Kynnös from Leijonan Luola. It's the Finnish version of Shark Tank. So we talked about social media and making money on social media.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask you, what would you have liked to know before starting your company? Because it's often a big investment, both time-wise and money-wise, but also psychologically, because at least from what I understood by questioning entrepreneurs and listening to your podcast, it's difficult to restrain yourself from giving all your energy into the company and maybe forcing yourself to take holiday, this kind of thing. So how was it for you, and what would you have liked to know?
Well, that's a very good question. One of the most important lessons that I have learned is that you really can't count too much on anyone.
That's a dramatic.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if it's that dramatic, but it's also like business is business. Of course, you have to be optimistic, but you have to keep in mind that unless everything is written down, unless you have contracts, unless you have finished the project, you can't be sure that everything goes as planned. And that's business. Like, I never take business personally. That's something that also you have to remind yourself about sometimes, especially if you're discussing price. Because, like, of course it is okay to ask if I would lower my price or whatever. It's normal to discuss about things. It's normal to also compromise. But I've learned to hold on to, I've always been a fan of holding on to my own principles. And that's also one reason why I became an entrepreneur, that I have the liberty to choose who I work with and what kind of projects I do, and that my actions are aligned with my values. So, but it's not always that easy, especially regarding respecting yourself and staying true to yourself, and not like doing things for when we discuss about like price point and everything, not giving like too low prices and
I think it's a super good advice, because for most of the foreigners, we are not used to this culture of in Finland, when you apply to a job and you have to go sign the contract, they ask you, how much would you like to be paid? It never happened to me before that an employer, like, usually you have a price and that's it. But in Finland, there is always this space for discussion, and for a lot of foreigners, for instance, we are not aware, this is actually something to remember, that online you can always check on Finnish official websites how much a person doing this kind of job is supposed to be paid on average. So there is like an official average, and you can refer yourself to this average when you discuss salary. But in entrepreneurship, it's very difficult, because sometimes you're creating your job, creating your title, or discussing for a specific contract in specific context. So I think it's reassuring to see that also for Finns, it's a moment of, okay, how do I evaluate the price of my own work? It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult, because at the same time you have to have cash flow. So you can't like have too high prices, but then if the prices are too low, then you don't have much self-respect, you don't value your own work, and you won't have that much money or customers either. So it's a balance, like finding the balance, that's very challenging all the time. And many of my customers and clients, when they have been working with me, they might even tell me to increase the prices.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't gain much new clients if I did that.
Okay.
I think so. or at least it would take a lot of more time because I work in the field of communications and marketing, and there is so much competition.
Okay.
So having your first projects, having your first references, and even now when I have references, I also have to benchmark myself with my competitors, but then staying true to that, it can sometimes be challenging.
But just to come back slightly to what you said about sometimes you feel like even your employers are suggesting you could be paid more, and it's something that happened to me. That one time they asked me, how much would you like to be paid for this service? I gave a price and they say, actually we're thinking of double, and so why didn't you give me the price since the beginning? And actually it was a really good lesson, because now I tend to overestimate prices, and I realized that I didn't overestimate. I was like slightly under what they were expecting to give me, and still in my head it's like, oh, wow, it's such a huge sum. And I feel it's also because when we are just coming out of university, you're a bit shy to ask for a certain salary, because we feel like, oh, I don't have enough experience. We tend to underestimate the value of our work.
As an entrepreneur, you have to remember that the price that you give, that's not your salary. Straightforward, not. So it's maybe you have like 1/3 of it as a salary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
when you're a full-time entrepreneur. So if you charge 100 euros for an hour, you won't get 100 euros as like sort of salary, because you have all of these expenses. And if you want to have any vacation, then you have to save up for that. And it's like, yeah, so very seldomly, if you're a part-time entrepreneur, then it could be a bit more aligned with these like salary that you would receive as an employee. And maybe a good thing for foreigners to know is that it's very expensive for companies to employ people in Finland. And you could multiply the salary that you have as the salary that you get with like no taxes or anything taken away from it. It's 150. You could add 150% to it, and that's the cost for someone to employ you. So if you're thinking about the price for your own work and what you would like to earn, multiply it with 1.5 at least. 1.7 or 2 would be better.
Okay, that's a really good advice. Actually.
And 3 if you want to have the vacations.
Okay. Yeah, and actually something that you would have liked to know, maybe practically, how did it change your schedule or your way of living?
Well, yeah, I would have maybe became an entrepreneur sooner if I knew that it gives so much liberty.
Okay, that's good.
Because that's also one reason why I don't feel like I would need a vacation. Like today, I started my work in the morning because that suits me, and then I went to the gym in the middle of the day, and nobody asks me, where are you? And I'm not accountable for anyone. And then I came back home and I continued with the work, and now I came here for this podcast, and maybe I'll continue in the evening if I have energy. Of course, if I would have deadlines, then I would have to respect those deadlines, and yeah, it's very important to respect all of your deadlines. And sometimes the liberty is starting your day at 6 a.m. and finishing it at 11 p.m. or 12. So yeah. It depends, but I really liked the freedom that it comes with.
How did you find the balance with the contracts coming? Is it really random and sometimes I have a lot of contracts, or did you manage to force yourself, okay, I don't want to work on Saturday and Sunday, for instance, or there is this day of the week where I need to force myself to go to bed not too late, these kind of rules that to still structure your schedule?
Yeah, well, sometimes the challenge is that I don't have that much of a structure, but I don't have that many contracts that would bind me for certain working hours, because that's also something you have to be very careful with. If you want to be an entrepreneur, then you shouldn't be forced into certain working hours. And of course, there are some exceptions. And when I work at an event or a trade fair, I can decide that, well, no, I'll just quit this place and come back later in the evening when no one's here. Of course not. But if I'm talking about the communications part and marketing part, when it comes to working with a computer, laptop, there I wouldn't even agree to any specific hours. And actually, if your the partner, if your client tries to suggest that you would have to come to the office, so work from the office and work during certain hours, there's a risk that you might no longer be an entrepreneur, but it would actually be a cover-up for employing someone and avoiding to pay all the fees. And that could bring a lot of problems for your customer or client if the tax office gets into that. And of course, it could also bring some, I'm not sure if it could bring any consequences for you, but yeah, I do not recommend signing any contracts that would bind you. Of course, there are always exceptions, but if we're talking about marketing and communications, then in general, there shouldn't be any obligations for normal office work. And yeah.
And just about contracts or papers in general, were you always asking help from your family, or did you have this kind of more national organizations to support you, or did you do it on your own?
Well, in the very beginning, I used these services, but that was before becoming a part-time entrepreneur. But now when I decided to start up as a full-time entrepreneur, I've actually studied a little bit of business law myself at the Turku University. So I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert in that field, but I know enough that you should use an expert. Well, not for every case, because of course, every time that I sell my services, that is a contract. So I don't ask a lawyer every time, like, no, there would be no point. But I knew that I would want to invest in general terms and conditions for my work. And I had that done by a lawyer. And that was one of my biggest investments money-wise in the beginning. But I'm sure that it's worth it. And I already feel that it's worth it. Like, nothing gives you 100% of a guarantee, nothing, because of course then you could go to court and argue about the contract and you don't want to go there. Yeah. But the reason that it's good to do all of this and to pay for it is to have the discussion with an expert, and also to think about what are the terms that you want to work with. What does this mean? What kind of risk does this present, and how could we maybe avoid some of the risks or make them less likely? And yeah, so it was mostly like that part that has paid off. And when I present the general terms and conditions to my clients and they actually read them, then sometimes, of course, we can negotiate that we leave something out. It might affect the price or it might not. And the most important thing is that we have discussed this part, because without the discussion there can be a lot of misunderstandings, and conflicts are often caused by misunderstandings. So I think that was a very valuable investment, and when you use them in advance, it's often cheaper than to start arguing in court. And of course, it's always good to have insurance in case somebody would want to sue you. So I have insurance.
Yeah, but it's super practical things that sometimes we don't want to deal with them right now, especially because in our case, most of the papers are in Finnish. They're like, oh no, I need to check a paper in a foreign language, but it's really worth it. And I think it's very smart, that choice of yours to go to university. But now we will move on to our last question. I asked you to think about the successes or failures that maybe punctuated your entrepreneurship journey, and maybe to draw some advice for future entrepreneurs from these events that you went through. So what could you advise to someone who is like ready to start a company, or maybe who is hesitating but would like to know a bit more practically, okay, what should I pay attention to, or what kind of risk should I be ready to face?
Well, the risks depend on your industry, of course, and also on your goals. Yeah. If you want to become rich very fast, then usually that demands a lot of risk. I would like to encourage to start and, of course, do your research beforehand. And Bisness Turku would be a great option for that. And usually you can go there even if you wouldn't be sure if you want to become an entrepreneur. They're not forcing anyone to become an entrepreneur. And then there's a lot of information available online, also in English. So I would read that, and I would ask Bisness Turku or another organization that's like Bisness Turku for advice and for these sources where I could educate myself a little further. And then I also work as a volunteer in the Association of Entrepreneurs. I would recommend warmly to attend events organized by these kind of associations, because there you can already start networking, and some of the events are open for everyone, so you don't have to be a member of the association. It's good to have a community and to be a part of a community and to have people that can relate to your situation and that can give you advice. And don't be afraid to ask, because usually people are very kind and very willing to help you. So yeah, do your research, join associations, don't be afraid to ask for advice, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's part of the journey, as cliche as it is. And you can manage risks by avoiding like investments in the beginning. But of course, if you avoid investments, then you are also, it also affects your possibilities to develop your business. So depending on your situation, if you're a startup, then of course, I'm not saying avoid risks, because it's a different kind of mindset and different kind of a scenario. But in my case, if I would have taken many risks, I would have been personally bankrupt. So if they wouldn't have like turned out well. So because I'm responsible with my personal finances. So yeah, take risks, but reasonable risks in the beginning. And be prepared that it's going to be a roller coaster. So sometimes it's very good, sometimes you question yourself, but that's part of the game.
And what did you do when you were questioning yourself? Like, what made you believe again in the project, or in myself? Maybe like talking with other entrepreneurs and sharing experiences and realizing that this is completely normal, and or then succeeding in a project, having positive feedback, anything, having a good night's sleep. I don't know. So yeah. As you could hear it in Elli-Noora's interview, life as an entrepreneur offers a lot of freedom, but implies also a lot of responsibilities. If you feel uncertain about some legal or financial matters, you should not be shy about asking questions to experts in that field. Luckily for you, Finland offers a lot of services to support you throughout your entrepreneurial journey. In my case, I wanted to create a media production company because, as you may have guessed, I love to direct podcast videos. We scheduled an appointment to define the legal status of my business, and they compared different models to see what would suit best my student lifestyle. Most of the paperwork to fill was available in English, and the experts came to help me with unfamiliar terms when needed. Entrepreneurship is a continuous learning journey, and I personally grown a lot while facing challenges but also successes. I hope that this episode has tickled your interest for the business world and that you will dig deeper inside this field yourself. Hello, if you are listening to this part of the podcast or watching the last videos, it means you have reached the end of our 6-episode series, What's Next Finland. Thank you for listening, and don't hesitate to comment in the sections dedicated below on Spotify or YouTube to tell us what you thought about the series, or if you want to share your own comments and advice for other internationals living in Finland. Thank you everyone for listening to What's Next Finland, and maybe see you for other projects. This was Noémie Hueber for What's Next Finland.